There's something nobody ever told you about growing up the way you did. Not your teachers, not your friends, not even the therapist you maybe saw for a few months before you convinced yourself you were fine. Nobody sat you down and said, "Hey, what happened to you in that house?" That didn't just leave scars. It left you with abilities. Real ones. Ones that most people spend their entire lives trying to develop and never do. But you have them right now. You've had them for years. You just never knew what to call them. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Because here's the thing about growing up with a narcissistic parent. And I want you to really hear this. It doesn't just hurt you. It rewires you. It takes the soft, open, trusting child you're supposed to be, and it puts them through something so intense, so unpredictable, so emotionally demanding that they come out the other side fundamentally different from every other person in the room. Not worse. Different. And in some very specific, very powerful ways, better. Better at things that matter. Better at things the world actually rewards. Better at things that, once you understand them, you will never take for granted again. Now I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, this sounds like one of those videos that tries to put a positive spin on trauma, tries to make pain sound cute, tries to tell you that everything you went through was secretly a blessing. That's not what this is. I'm not here to romanticize what happened to you. What happened to you was hard. In many cases it was devastating, and it deserves to be called exactly what it was, a childhood where you were not safe to be fully yourself. A childhood where love came with conditions, where the person who was supposed to protect you was often the one you most needed protection from. That's real. That's painful. And none of what I'm about to say is meant to minimize it. But here's what's also real, and this is the part that took me a long time to understand. Human beings are not passive victims of their circumstances. Especially not children. Children are survival machines. When a child is placed in an environment that is emotionally unstable, unpredictable, or unsafe, that child's brain doesn't just absorb the damage, it adapts, it builds systems, it develops tools. And those tools, those survival mechanisms that felt so necessary when you were 8 or 12 or 16 years old, they don't disappear when you leave the house. They come with you. They grow with you. They shape who you are as an adult in ways that are so deep and so automatic you probably don't even recognize them as skills. You just think, this is how I am. This is just me. But it's not just you, it's what you built. And today I'm going to show you exactly what you built. There are 4 traits, 4 very specific traits that almost every adult who grew up with a narcissistic parent develops. And I'm going to walk you through each one. I'm going to tell you where it came from. I'm going to tell you what it cost you. And I'm going to tell you honestly, specifically, in real terms, what kind of superpower it becomes when you learn to use it with intention instead of just having it run your life on autopilot. But before we get into the 4 traits, I need you to understand something first. Because if you don't understand this, the rest of the video won't land the way I want it to. Narcissistic parents don't all look the same. Some of them are loud, they yell, they rage. They make scenes in public. They humiliate you in front of other people. They blow up and then act like nothing happened. You grew up walking on eggshells, always watching the temperature in the room, always waiting for the explosion. You could feel coming before anyone else could. Some of them are quiet. They don't yell. They withdraw. They give you the silent treatment for days until you don't even remember what you did wrong, but you'll do anything to make them come back. They use guilt like a language. They make you feel responsible for their emotions without ever raising their voice. Some of them look completely normal to the outside world. They're charming at dinner parties. They're well-liked at work. Your friends thought they were so cool, so funny, so together. And you learned very early that the version of your parent the world saw and the version you lived with were 2 completely different people. And you learned something even harder than that nobody would believe you if you told them. Different as they look, all narcissistic parents share the same core dynamic. At the center of everything is this: their emotional needs always came first, not your needs, not your feelings, not your safety or your sense of self or your right to just be a kid. Their needs, their image, their mood, their story about who they were and who you were supposed to be in it. And you, as the child in that situation, had 2 choices: disappear entirely, or become extraordinary at navigating another person's emotional reality. Most of you chose the second option, maybe not consciously, but you chose it. You became a student of human behavior before you were even old enough to know what that meant. You became fluent in a language most adults never learn. The language of subtext, of energy, of what's really being said underneath the words. You became someone who could read a room, manage a mood, shift a dynamic, predict an outcome. You became, without knowing it, someone remarkable. Now let me show you what that actually looks like. Let's start with the first trait. And I want you to pay close attention here because this one is going to feel almost uncomfortably familiar. You can tell when something is off. Not sometimes, almost always. Before a single word is spoken. Before anyone does anything. You walk into a room and within seconds, your entire nervous system is already running calculations. You're reading the air. You're clocking the body language. You're noticing the half-second pause before someone answered a question. The way someone smiled didn't quite reach their eyes. The slight tension in someone's jaw when they said they were fine. You notice all of it. You notice it automatically, instantly, without trying. And the uncomfortable part is, you're usually right. You've probably been told you're paranoid. You've probably been told you're oversensitive. You've probably told yourself that you read too much into things. But then the thing you felt turned out to be real. The person who seemed off actually was off. The situation that felt wrong actually was wrong. The friend who said everything was fine eventually admitted they'd been lying, and you knew before they said a word. This is what I call the human lie detector trait, and it is one of the most extraordinary and one of the most exhausting things about you. Here's where it comes from. When you were a child living with a narcissistic parent, your emotional safety was never guaranteed. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your parents' mood was the weather system your entire life was built around, and that weather system was completely unpredictable. A morning could start calm and turn violent in 20 minutes. A good day could become a terrible night for no reason you could ever identify. Love could be there 1 hour and gone the next, replaced by coldness or rage, or that particular brand of silence that somehow felt worse than yelling. In that environment, your brain made a decision you didn't consciously make, but your nervous system made it for you. It decided that the most important skill you could possibly have was early warning detection. If you could sense the shift in mood before it became a storm, you could prepare. You could make yourself smaller. You could disappear. You could say the right thing, do the right thing, be the right version of yourself, the version that kept the peace before the situation escalated. So your brain started paying attention to everything, not just words. Words are actually the least reliable form of communication. Most people know that now, but you learned it as a child because your parent was often very skilled at saying one thing while meaning another. So you stopped trusting words and started reading everything else. Tone of voice, breathing patterns, the speed at which someone moved through the house, whether they made eye contact or avoided it, whether the silence was comfortable or loaded, whether the compliment had an edge underneath it. You became, without any formal training, a world-class reader of human beings. And now, as an adult, that skill is always running. It never shuts off. You go on a first date, and within 10 minutes you've already identified 3 inconsistencies between what this person is presenting and what they're actually feeling. You go to a work meeting and you can sense the political tension in the room that everyone else seems completely oblivious to. You meet someone new, and something in you goes quiet and still and watchful, not because you're being unfriendly, but because some part of you is gathering information before it decides whether you're safe. This is the gift side of this trait. This is the gift side of this trait. And it is genuinely a gift. In a world full of people who take things at face value, who get blindsided by betrayal, who trust too easily and too completely, you have a built-in protection system that most people would pay anything to have. You have been lied to by an expert, your own parent, someone who knew every button to push, every story to tell, every way to make you doubt your own perception of reality. If you survived that, and you did, then ordinary manipulation, ordinary dishonesty, ordinary social performance doesn't stand a chance against you. You see through it every time. But here's the cost. And I promised you I would be honest about the cost. Your brain does not know how to turn this off. The same system that protects you from real threats also fires in situations where there is no threat. You're at a party with people who genuinely like you, and your nervous system is still scanning, still checking, still quietly asking, is this real? Are they being genuine? What's underneath this? You're in a relationship with someone who actually loves you. No conditions, no agenda, no hidden cruelty. And part of you is waiting for the mask to drop. Because in your experience, it always did. So even when it isn't there, you're still looking for it. This is called hypervigilance, and it is the shadow side of your superpower. The people closest to you have probably felt it. They've said things like, "Why don't you trust me? Why do you always assume the worst? Why does it feel like you're always testing me?" And you don't have a good answer because you don't even fully realize you're doing it. It's just how you move through the world. It's just how you've always been. It's so automatic that it doesn't feel like a survival strategy anymore. It just feels like you. But here's what I need you to understand. The hypervigilance is not a personality flaw. It is a borrowed behavior. It was the right tool for the environment you grew up in. It kept you safe. It kept you sane. In that house, with that parent, it was necessary. You are not in that house anymore, and that means you get to start practicing something you were never allowed to practice as a child. Something that probably feels dangerous even to consider. You get to start practicing the decision slowly, carefully, on your own terms, of when to trust what you feel, and when to let yourself just be present, when to let the scanner rest, when to decide that this room is safe, and you are allowed to simply be in it. That skill, your extraordinary ability to read people, is not your enemy. It's one of the most valuable things about you. The work is not to get rid of it. The work is to be in charge of it instead of letting it be in charge of you. The second trait is the one that messes with your identity in ways you probably haven't fully unpacked yet. Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question instead of just moving past it. Who are you when nobody needs anything from you? Not who are you at work, not who are you with your friends, not who are you when someone is upset and needs you to manage the situation. Who are you when there's absolutely no role to play, no mood to read, no version of yourself required? If that question made you feel slightly uncomfortable, slightly blank, you already know what I'm talking about. Children of narcissistic parents become masters of adaptation. Not by choice, by necessity, because in a home where one person's emotional state dictates the temperature of everything, the fastest way to survive is to become whatever that person needs you to be. Around your parent, you learn to be small, quiet, agreeable. You didn't have big reactions. You didn't take up too much space. You didn't have needs that were inconvenient. You learned to shrink yourself down to a size that was safe. But then you went to school, and at school being small didn't work. At school you needed to be someone else entirely. So you became that person. Maybe you became the funny one who made everyone laugh. Maybe you became the responsible one that teachers loved. Maybe you became the quiet observer who nobody quite figured out. Whatever version worked, you became it. And then you came home and became small again. The switch was so fast, so seamless, that you stopped noticing you were doing it. This is the shapeshifter trait. And on the surface, it sounds like people-pleasing, but it runs much deeper than that. People-pleasing is a behavior. What you developed is an entire system. The ability to walk into any room, read the social dynamics in seconds, identify what version of yourself will work best in this specific context, and then become that version so naturally that nobody ever suspects it's a performance. Think about how rare that actually is. Most people are fundamentally the same person in every room they walk into. They don't adjust, they don't adapt, they bring their whole unfiltered self everywhere and just hope it lands. You don't do that. You read the room before you enter it, you calibrate, you modulate. You can be the most confident person in a job interview and the most empathetic friend at a difficult dinner and the most composed person in a crisis and the most relaxed person at a casual hangout. And you move between those versions so fluidly that people who know you in different contexts often feel like they know completely different people. That is a genuinely extraordinary social intelligence. In professional settings, it makes you magnetic. In leadership, it makes you effective. In relationships, it makes people feel deeply understood. The world calls this emotional intelligence and spends billions of dollars trying to teach it. You have it naturally because you had no choice but to develop it. But the cost, the real cost of this trait is not that you're fake. The cost is that somewhere in all that adapting and all that shifting and all that becoming what the room needs, the thread back to your actual self got very, very thin. You know how to be what other people need. The harder question is whether you know what you need, what you actually want, what you actually think. Not the version of your thoughts that's already been filtered through what you imagine the other person wants to hear. The raw, unedited, not yet adapted version of your own preferences, opinions, desires. Do you know what those are? Or have you been translating yourself for so long that the original language feels foreign now? This is the work. Not to stop adapting. Your ability to adapt is a gift, and you should keep it. The work is to build something underneath the adaptations, a foundation, a self that exists before the room, before the audience, before the role, something that stays constant no matter who you're with. That's not something your childhood gave you the chance to build, but it's something you can build now, one honest moment at a time. Now let's talk about the third trait. And this one is the one that the world rewards you for constantly, which makes it the hardest one to question. You don't stop, you don't quit, you don't slow down. When something needs to get done, you get it done. When things fall apart, you hold it together. When the pressure is highest and everyone else is dissolving, you somehow become more focused, more capable, more effective. You are the person people call in a crisis. You are the person who finishes things. You are the person who, no matter how exhausted, no matter how depleted, no matter how much every cell in your body is begging for rest, keeps going. And people admire you for it. They tell you you're strong. They tell you you're impressive. They tell you they don't know how you do it. What they don't know is that you don't feel like you have a choice. This is the Iron Machine trait. And like everything else on this list, it was built in that house. Because in a home with a narcissistic parent, rest was not safe. Stillness drew attention. Doing nothing was evidence of laziness, ingratitude, weakness, whatever your particular parent decided to call it. So you learned to always be useful, always be productive, always be doing something that justified your presence. And you carried that with you into school, into work, into every relationship. This permanent, low-grade belief that your value is directly tied to your output. That love is something you earn through performance. That if you stop moving long enough for people to really look at you without the productivity, without the achievement, without the thing you just accomplished, there will be nothing there worth keeping. That is the lie your childhood told you. And it is the most expensive lie you are still paying for. The fourth trait is the quietest one. It doesn't show up in how you perform or how you read people or how you move through social situations. It shows up in the silence between moments, in the way you respond or don't respond when something actually touches you, in the gap between what you feel and what you allow yourself to feel, in the strange, unsettling experience of watching your own life happen from a slight distance, like you're always one step removed from fully being inside it. Here it is, plainly, you don't fully trust your own emotions. Not because you don't have them. You have them. They're in there, deep, intense, real. But somewhere between feeling something and allowing yourself to actually feel it, there's a wall. Automatic, instant. A wall that goes up before you even consciously decide to put it there. And behind that wall is everything you were never allowed to express. Every time you were sad and were told you were being dramatic. Every time you were angry and were told you were being disrespectful. Every time you were scared and were told you were being weak. Every time something genuinely hurt you and the person who hurt you looked at you and made you feel like the problem was that you were hurt, not that they had hurt you. You learned something from all of those moments. You learned that your emotional reality was not welcome, that your feelings were inconvenient, that the way you experienced things internally was somehow wrong, too much, too loud, too sensitive, too needy. And so you did the only rational thing a child can do in that situation. You started locking it away. You built a vault, deep, secure, impenetrable. You put everything in there, the grief, the rage, the longing, the confusion, the love you desperately wanted to give and never felt safe enough to give completely. You locked it all away and you kept functioning, because functioning was survival, because falling apart was not an option when the person who was supposed to catch you was the one making you fall. And now you are an adult, and the vault is still there, and it is still full. This shows up in specific ways that I want to name clearly, because I think you'll recognize every single one of them. Someone does something that genuinely hurts you, and your first instinct is not anger, it's self-examination. You immediately start asking yourself whether you're overreacting, whether you're being too sensitive, whether you somehow caused it or deserved it. The pain is real, but you interrogate the pain before you allow yourself to feel it, because somewhere deep in your nervous system there is still a voice that sounds like your parent telling you that your feelings are the problem, or this one, someone loves you, really loves you, shows up consistently, treats you with genuine care, says the things you always needed to hear, and instead of relaxing into that, instead of receiving it, you feel a low-level anxiety that you can't quite explain. You're waiting for the condition. You're waiting for the cost. You're waiting for the moment when the love reveals itself to be transactional, because in your experience, love was always transactional. Free, unconditional love feels so foreign that it reads as suspicious. And so you hold people at a distance even when they've done everything right. Not because they failed you, because you were failed so early and so completely that safety itself feels unsafe. This is the emotional vault trait. And the gift, because there is always a gift, is that you are extraordinarily steady in situations that break other people open. You can sit with someone in their worst moment without flinching. You can hold space for pain, for chaos, for crisis, in a way that most people simply cannot. You don't panic when emotions get big and messy, because you have been living alongside big, messy, unprocessed emotion your entire life. You are not afraid of the dark. You have lived there. And that makes you one of the safest people another human being can be around in their hardest moments. But you deserve more than being the person who holds everyone else together. You deserve to be held too. You deserve to fall apart sometimes and have someone catch you. You deserve to say, "This hurt me," without immediately bracing for the argument about whether your hurt is valid. You deserve to receive love without treating it like a test you're waiting to fail. And here's the truest thing I can tell you about the vault. What's inside it is not going to disappear because you keep it locked. It doesn't work that way. It sits there. It gets heavier. It leaks into everything. Your relationships, your self-worth, your ability to be fully present in your own life. The only way out is through. Not all at once. Not in one dramatic moment of release. But slowly, deliberately. On your own terms. One feeling at a time, taken out of the vault. Looked at honestly, and given the space that was denied when you were too young to protect yourself. That is not weakness. That is the bravest thing a person who grew up the way you did can do. So let's bring it all together, because I want you to see yourself clearly before this video ends. You walk into a room and read it in seconds. Not because you're paranoid, but because you were trained by the most demanding teacher imaginable. You can become what any situation requires without losing your footing. Not because you're fake, but because you developed a social fluency that most people never access. You push through pressure that would stop most people cold. Not because you're a machine, but because you built a relationship with difficulty that turned it into fuel. And you hold your emotions with the steadiness that makes you an anchor for everyone around you. Not because you don't feel, but because you learn to carry feeling without being crushed by it. These 4 traits did not come for free. You paid for them. You paid in ways that were not fair, were not your fault, and were not your fault, and were not something any child should have to pay. That is the truth, and I will never tell you otherwise, but you paid. And you got something back, and what you got back belongs entirely to you. The only question now is what you do with it, whether you let these traits run on autopilot, scanning when there is nothing to scan, adapting when you're already accepted, grinding when you're already accepted, grinding when you're already enough, vaulting emotions that deserve to finally breathe. Or whether you take the wheel, whether you decide consciously and deliberately that the survival skills that got you here are now going to be redirected, refined, used on purpose, aimed at the life you actually want instead of the emergency that no longer exists. You survived something that would have broken a lot of people. You didn't just survive it. You built something inside yourself that is rare and real and worth more than you currently give it credit for. Now stop surviving and start choosing.